this morning, we're going to read Isaiah 53, and then we'll go to chapter 9. Who has believed our message, and whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? He grew up before him like a tender shoot, and like a root out of dry ground. He had no beauty or majesty to attract us to him, nothing in his appearance that we should desire him. He was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows, and familiar with suffering, like one whom men hide their faces. He was despised, and we esteemed him not. Surely he took up our infirmities and carried our sorrows. Yet we considered him stricken by God, smitten by him, and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was upon him, and by his wounds we are healed. We all like sheep have gone astray. Each of us turned from his own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. He was oppressed and afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. He was led like a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before her shearers is silent, so he did not open his mouth. By oppression and judgment he was taken away, and who can speak of his descendants? For he was cut off from the land of the living. For the transgressions of my people he was stricken. He was assigned a grave with the wicked, and with the rich in his death, though he had done no violence, nor was any deceit in his mouth. Yet it was the Lord's will to crush him and cause him to suffer. And though the Lord makes his life a guilt offering, he will see his offspring and prolong his days, and the will of the Lord will prosper in his hand. After the suffering of his soul, he will see the light of life and be satisfied. By knowing my righteous servant will justify many, and he will bear their iniquities. Therefore I will give him a portion among the great, and he will divide the spoils with the strong, because he poured out his life unto death, and was numbered with the transgressors. For he bore the sin of many, and made intercession for the transgressors. This is the word of the Lord. And then Isaiah 9, 2-7. The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On the living in the land of the shadow of death, a light has dawned. You have enlarged the nation and increased their joy. They rejoice before you as people rejoice at the harvest, as men rejoice when dividing the plunder. Whereas in the days of Midian's defeat, you have shattered the yoke of the burdens. You have shattered the yoke that burdens them, the bar across their shoulders, the rod of their oppressor. Every warrior's boot used to battle, and every garment rolled in blood will be destined for burning, will be fuel for the fire. For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and peace there will be no end. He will reign on David's throne over his kingdom, establishing and upholding it with justice and righteousness that time on forever. The zeal of the Lord Almighty will accomplish this. This is the word of the Lord.
So let's find out today, who are the people who are done Christmas shopping? Those are the type A organizers right there. Those are the people you want. Or they just like not dealing with the crowds or whatever else. Yes. Anyway, last Sunday, we were looking at Christ as the perfect gift for humanity, that he meets our needs in so many different ways. And one of the things that really we kicked off the message with was what is one of the elements of giving the perfect gift? And it really is knowing who the person is who's going to receive that gift. That when you know somebody really well, the gift lands because you're hitting something on that wish list or a need or something in their heart that really is one of those greatest gifts. And so as a child, you probably remember that gift that was the greatest either birthday or Christmas gift, and you were like, that was amazing that mom and dad actually got this, or whoever it was gave you that gift, and it meant so much to you. Which was for me the GT Snow Racer in the trunk of the car. And so the girls had a sleepover on this past weekend, and so we hooked up the sleighs with the GTs and drag them around the thing, and it's a lot of fun. And we busted it was so much fun, we busted the seat off of the sleigh. Yes. It's all fun and games. What is it? It's all fun and games till someone loses an eye, and then it's a sport. Anyway, the perfect gift is knowing who's receiving it. And as I was pondering the scriptures that we went through, just that reveal how Jesus is the perfect gift for humanity, one of the things that I was led to in reading Isaiah and the Christmas passages is not only the wonder that, wow, hundreds of years before Jesus was born, Isaiah penned those letters. The scriptures we read this morning were written in a prophetic manner by a prophet who was like, this is what God is going to bring about on the earth. And when you read them, the wonder sometimes escapes us that, man, Isaiah was writing down, moved by the Spirit of God, writing down the characteristics of who would be the King of Kings and rule on David's throne. It's like mind-blowing, this prophetic, amazing passages in Isaiah 53 and Isaiah 9, which we read this morning. And so this morning, instead of looking at what makes the perfect gift, which is knowing what the person is like or the needs of the person, knowing that person deeply, what I really sense the Lord would be leading us to this morning is where is the ground, or what are the elements that allow us to receive a gift? Because if you're like me, sometimes it's hard to receive. If somebody wants to give you something, and you see this at Christmas time, somebody tries to tuck a few dollars in somebody's pocket for whatever. You know, you paid for the dinner, this or that, and they're fighting at the table. No, put it in your, you don't need that. Keep that. Come on, stop. And what I learned, especially as a pastor, is that you need to learn how to be gracious in receiving sometimes. For those of us who have a hard time receiving, there are some spiritual lessons I really sense at Christmas time that we can learn. And so if God gave us the greatest gift that fits the greatest human need, then essentially he also lays a map out of the pitfalls of what we need to be aware of, that we cannot receive the gift if these things aren't in place. Where is the gift going to land? And so the ability to receive a gift, not only can it be hard, but there's three elements this morning that I feel the scriptures lay out clearly, that if we are going to receive God's greatest gift, that there needs to be a posture in our heart, our mind, our attitudes to receive it in a way that we can actually have what he is offering to us, that we can take it upon ourselves and bring it in close to us. And so these three things, number one is humility, number two is faith, and the last one is, I'm going to say worship, and I'll expand on that a little bit more. But you know that when somebody's trying to give you something, you see that interchange at the table with your aunts and uncles where they don't want to receive money for something or whatever else. That the expression is I don't need that. You need that more than I do. I don't need that. And even, with even parents now, like our parents will send us a gift or whatever else as an adult. And you're like, Mom, you keep that. And they're like, no, I want to give this. I want to. And there's this thing where we need to humbly receive something, because receiving a gift, oftentimes we won't receive it because we say, I don't need that. It's not something I need. And so we have to humble ourselves before that. When Jesus comes into the world, these prophetic passages that we read this morning the Isaiah 9 passage, and in verse 2, it speaks about a light coming into the world. And when you read Isaiah 9, you can't help but think about the book of John and chapter 1 and verses 1 to 14 about Jesus coming into the world as a light. And so, reading in the book of John, in verses 1 to 14, it says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, but the darkness has not understood it. There came a man who was sent from God. His name was John. He came as a witness to testify concerning that light, so that through him all men might believe. He himself was not the light. He came only as a witness to the light. To the true light that gives light to every man was coming into the world. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. Yet to all who received him, to all who believed in his name, he gave the right to become the children of God." Children not born of human decision or husband's will, but born of God. The Word became flesh, made his dwelling among us. We have seen the glory of the one and only who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. One of the things about receiving a gift is that it's not guaranteed that when a gift is given that there's someone at the other end who will receive it. Because the posture of the heart, it says here in John 1 that a light came into the world. And it was the light of men. It was a true light into the world. But there was some who could receive it and those who could not receive it. And I really sense the dividing line here was the posture of the heart, where humility is one of the postures of the heart that allows us to receive the gift of God. And as Paul has said in his own preaching in 1 Corinthians chapter 1 and verses 20 to 24, he says, "Where is the wise man? Where is the scholar? Where is the philosopher of this age? Has not God made foolish the wisdom of the world? For since in the wisdom of God, the world through its wisdom did not know him, God was pleased through the foolishness of what was preached to save those who believe. Jews demand a miraculous sign, and Greeks look for wisdom, but we preach Christ crucified, a stumbling block to Jews and foolishness to Gentiles. But to those whom God has called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ, the power of God and the wisdom of God." Humility, when Jesus is expressed in Isaiah chapter 9 and in John chapter 1 as a light coming into the world, it says men could not receive it because of their darkest deeds. In John chapter 3, that there's this darkness in the human heart that is light is repulsive because it exposes where you are. And humility requires us to acknowledge, this is where I am. And I don't know, for those of you who are outdoors enthusiasts, if you've ever been lost in the woods, one of the greatest things that is, I guess, a help when you're lost, and this can be even somewhere in traffic or whatever else, is when you know you are here. You know, in the mall, you go to a new mall. Our girls love that too on holidays. Let's go to the big mall. So we'll go to these big malls, and you find that big square or triangle thing in the hallways, and you're looking for the arrow where it says, "You are here." And it gives you your reference point of this is where you're here, and now you can navigate to where you want to go. Well, humility is the precursor to accepting you are here. Because some of us don't want to hear that. You are here. This is where you are. You are here. Because the deeds in our heart, it says, are dark, and we don't want to be exposed by the light. But God says, you are here. We are in a place where we are in need of His mercy, His grace, and His gift in His Son of redemption. This is where we are. So for me, being an outdoors person, sometimes I get a little arrogant or cocky with my buddies because I do these trips on a regular basis. So one time I took a few fellas up when I was living in Terrace. One guy, one of my buddies was an ambulance driver. The other guy was a OPP guy. And so we're in the bush, and they're kind of just first time moose hunters. And so they're depending on me to get them down the rivers and whatever else. So we end up going out in the woods that night. And my one buddy, who's the police officer, he just before the sun goes down, this huge moose comes, and he shoots this huge moose. And so it's way back in the bush. So we go back, we start working on it, and we start getting it packed, and it was dark. And we go to head back to where the canoes are on the river. We're walking. And then finally, I'm like, turn around to the guys. I'm like, guys, I'm lost. I don't know where the river is. And so we keep walking. And I'm trying to look at the tree lines because you could still see the tree line a little bit. I'm thinking, I think that's where the lake is. Maybe not. So we loop back. Okay, so I said, we got to loop back to where we came from and start. Anyway, we're looping around for probably 45 minutes. And finally, the new guy, he's like, hey, do you think I should take my GPS out? And I'm like, buddy, we've been wandering around in the wilderness and you've got a GPS in your backpack? He's like, yeah, I brought it with me. I bought it up before we came up. And so I had to humble myself and let the newbie show us the way out because he had the actual reference point. You are here. You are here. Humility allows us to receive our reference point. You are here. You are here. And humility understands our need, that we need a light. We are in darkness. Lord, I need a light. I'm lost. On my own, I'm in darkness. And I acknowledge that I am in darkness and need a light. And He chooses to send us a light in Christ. Humility is submitting to the one who can see the map. So, same trip, he pulls out the GPS. You are here, wherever else. And then we had to navigate back to where the camp was, which was about 5 clicks up a stony, rocky, kind of lakey river thing. And so anybody who's seen my little motors that I take up north, they are pounded. They're like scratched and beat. I've got multiple propellers because I call them my rock finders, not my fish finder, my rock finders. Always hitting the rocks. And so on the way home, I had the GPS, and we're in the dark because we're tied all the canoes together, 3 or 4 canoes, and I'm driving with the motor. It's completely pitch black. You can't see anything, and I'm just looking at this little machine in my hand and just trying to steer the boat around rocks because you can see the rocks in the lake, steering this boat all the way home. Humility is submitting to the one who can see the map. Humility is humbling ourselves before the God of creation who sees the map and acknowledging, I don't have an accurate view of the map. You, God, have given us the light of the world, and you see the map of all things. And humility acknowledges that truth and then receives with grace that which is given. Receives the light with grace. Receives the one who is the map giver with grace. Lord, we receive it with humility. Humility is one of the elements in our hearts where we sing joy to the world. Let every heart prepare him room. Without humility, not only will you not understand you are here, you will not humble yourself to the one who sees the map. You will not be able to understand what he's given in Christ as the light of men. Next, and so humility is one of those things where we say, God, at this Christmas, help me to prepare to receive, to humble myself, to acknowledge I am here, I am in darkness, and I need that light. To acknowledge you are the one who sees the map. I do not. The next one is really faith, and trust is kind of linked to faith. Some of the greatest passage, or probably the greatest passage about what faith is, the nature of it, and how faith works is in Hebrews chapter 11. and chapter 12 as well. But chapter 11, verse 1 of Hebrews, it says, "Now faith is being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see." Faith is being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see. Faith really is this act of trusting something that you have not yet grasped physically in your hand and being certain of it, trusting that. It's being sure of what we hope for in the future and certain of what we do not see. It's trust in the nature or the character of the person who's giving you something, and it's trust in the object of what he's giving you. And so this other illustration I used this morning, and so many of you know that Danielle and I met and married in Sioux Lookout, which is quite far north. I think it's about 16 or 17 hours from here, north. And living up there, the roadways become like the highways in the wintertime. So all of the reserves and even the logging trucks do a lot of their logging over the lakes at that time. And so our church up north was mixed of a whole bunch of hodgepodge of backgrounds and nationalities. It was mostly native, non-native, but we had some Kenyans and where was the other one? It was another African state that we had another family from, Filipino families. And so some of our families at our church were not used to not only life in Canada, but life in the north. And so we were going on a youth trip, and we were going out to this other reserve, which was across the lake, like an ice road. And I had the school bus. So back then, our church had a couple school buses, so I loaded up the bus with a bunch of young people. And the two young teenagers who were from Africa, they were on the bus. And when I told them we're crossing the lake on the bus, they looked at me like I was like insane. They were like, "What? You can't do that." Like just in their mind, they just could not compute driving a bus on a lake is a suicide mission. And I felt terrible because when they were in the bus and we started to cross the lake, their like fingernails were literally like gripped into the seats, and they were just shaking with fear, like we are going to die today. Faith is trusting in the nature or the character of the object of that faith. Whereas when you live up north and you see, well, this thing can hold logging trucks loaded with logs. The lakes, you understand the nature of what you're trusting. Faith, as Hebrews says, it's being sure of what you hope for, that future that is not yet seen, and certain of what you do not see. If you've never seen a vehicle on the ice and you're riding in a school bus, you're thinking you're in a tomb ready to be like sunk into the water. Where God is giving light, it's as if in giving that light, he's also building a rescue bridge in the arms of his son. And so he's saying to us, have faith in this bridge that I'm building. I've sent my son, and he is the bridge over this chasm that is between God and man. And he's asking us by faith to cross on that bridge, to trust his own son, to cross over on that bridge, to put faith in what he's done in this rescue bridge that he's put in place through his son. God is giving us light to trust, to be led by it. He's giving us this rescue bridge in his son. And he's sending, as this picture came into my mind, he's sending a shepherd. And it's really this cool thing where it says he's going to rule in the lineage of David, and he's going to rule on that throne. Well, when you think of David, what story comes first when you think of King David? What is it? Goliath, of course. Especially if you're a young boy. It's like, that's the best story in the Bible. He's like, and it really is, it should be a PG rated story because it's kind of gory. He like takes the sword, chops off the giant's head at the end, and brings the head home. He's like, can you imagine a shepherd boy bringing the head? Look Look what I brought back, guys. It's like, okay, that's in the Bible. Boys, the young boys are like, that is awesome. God is sent a shepherd king to destroy the giants in our life. It says he's going to rule on the throne of David. He's going to be in the lineage of David. And when you think of Christ, you can see this shepherd boy who's bringing back the head of a giant, where Christ has come to destroy the giants in our lives. Those things that cause us to stay in darkness, those chasms that we cannot cross to be the bridge, those giants in our life, he has now come to sit as the shepherd king who will eternally have victory over the enemy. The light is true, the bridge is secure, and the thing that made that shepherd story amazing is that when David shows up to the front lines, Saul says, well, you gotta have the right tools to fight the giant. And he tries to, you know the story, he puts on his clunky armor, and he's, no, this is not going to work. This is not for me. This doesn't fit. And so he goes and he picks the stones out of the brook, the 5 smooth stones, and he has that little sling. And before he leaves, he tells King Saul, he says, look, I don't understand how this works, but there's been times where I've faced these threats of the lion, of the bear, and God delivered them into my hand as a young shepherd boy. And just as God was with me when he delivered the bear and the lion into my hand, God will be with me and deliver this giant into my hands. And so we understand that it is the Spirit of God on the shepherd king that is the power who destroys our giants. The same Spirit that was on King David when he faced off with that giant. It says there's going to be a king who will rule eternally in that same Spirit. And he will be the destroyer of the giants in our life. To receive the gift, we must embrace humility, embrace faith and trust in the object of our faith, who is the light, the bridge, that shepherd. And then lastly, I'm looking at worship. When you think of the word worship, you probably think of great music or gathering on Sunday for a Sunday service. But actually, the word worship, really, if you break it down, it is to give worth to something, to give value to something. That really is the root of worship, is that if something is worth something, you give it worth in your life. You make it some value to it. And so the word value and worship really go together. What do you value? What do you give worth to? Because when a gift is given to you, if you don't understand its worth, then oftentimes you can't really receive it. It's worth something, the value of it. And so when John was writing about Jesus coming into the world as a light, in verses 9 to 11, it says, the true light that gives light to every man was coming into the world. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to that which was his own, but they did not receive him. When Jesus came, there was not an understanding of how can there be worth in a baby born in a manger? How can there be worth in a king who is executed on a Roman cross? How can there be worth to that? And the human mind was perplexed. It says the Jews were perplexed because they were looking for a miraculous sign. And the Romans or the Greeks were perplexed because they were looking for some human wisdom. And Paul says they're looking in the wrong place, and they could not understand the worth of what God was giving in this baby born in a manger, in this king crucified. And so when Paul writes these words in 1 Corinthians in chapter 1 and verses 23 and 24, he says, but we preach Christ crucified, a stumbling block to Jews and foolishness to Gentiles, but to those whom God has called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ is the power of God and the wisdom of God. Church, this morning, the Christmas story really is the story of those who could receive him. In 1 John, it says there's people who could not receive him. How could there be the power and the wisdom of God in a baby in a manger? How could there be the power and the wisdom of God of a king who was executed on a Roman cross? And Paul says, but to those who believe, this is the power and the wisdom of God. And if Christ is the power and the wisdom of God, then it's fair for us to say that we need to value that, give it worth, worship at this, Christ, the power and the wisdom of God. And so we look at the Christmas story. Who was it that could receive the gift? It was an unmarried teenager in Mary. Thinking of the scorn and the jeers that she would face in her community, she was able to receive the gift. It was a carpenter who would have been enduring the swirling rumors from his workmates, seeing Mary's girth growing and recognizing, and them elbowing him, hey, buddy, what's going on there? It was the old man at the temple, Simeon, that we looked at the other week, who was waiting for the consolation of Israel, this weird prophet-type figure. It was the smelly shepherds out in the fields watching their flocks by night. Kind of the outcasts of the city that when they came into town, everybody would be like, kind of smell different. It was the weird stargazers, the outcasts they could see in the stars patterns and things moving. And in certain constellation, a revelation that there was a king to be born. It really was to those who were outside of the powerful. You see, when Christ comes, there is inevitably a collision of that which is valuable. There's a collision of values. There's a collision of what the human heart will now give worth to. And so for those who could receive him, we see these attributes of humility where Mary says, be it unto your servant as the Lord has spoken. I'll receive with humility. Those who couldn't receive him, a King Herod, self-centered, aggrandizing himself, no humility. The Pharisees, ruling with strength, their people, ruling with an iron fist. Caesar, the Roman mega power empire, could not receive. Because a baby in a manger and a king on a cross was offensive and foolish. And as John says, yet to those who could receive him, he invites us into what he's doing, crossing that bridge to become the family of God. And so there's this exchange of value. And one of the greatest pictures of that exchange of value is in this last passage I wanted to read from Hebrews in chapter 13. And it speaks of Christ. And church, this morning, it's really incumbent on us as the church to say, Lord, what is it that I give worth to in my life? Am I in the place that I can receive this gift where I would give worth to what you offer as the greatest gift? Do I truly give worth to it? Some of you keeping up on the news that's going on. Some of the news that's going on is crazy, but this past week there was two social media influencer types. They're the kind of the cocky types, and they both decided to fight professional fighters. It was they had these fights on TV. The one guy who fought Mike Tyson, it was kind of like a joke. They never really fought. So now he decides to step into the ring with a professional, real-time boxer. I was like, that is a big mistake. So he ends up in the hospital with a broken jaw, and he's just destroyed. Like, but if you're not a pro, you know the difference. There's a difference between pro and not pro. And really, as the church, God is giving us his gift, and he's saying, I'm calling you to place your bets. I'm calling you to put your worth where it belongs. I'm calling you to bet. And this really is, there's nothing as born as into this world, we have to place our bets because we live once, we die once. That's it. You have to place a bet. And so this is where, having some friends who were intellectuals and atheistic types in the past, and they would give me a hard time. And I'd be like, my answer is your story is like, look, I've placed my bet here on Jesus. I don't know for sure. Nobody knows anything completely for sure, but there's no way out of placing a bet. You got to place your life somewhere. And so I've placed it with Jesus. There's no one like him. And this is where I'm willing to bet my life on this. That God chose a baby in a manger and a king on a cross as the salvation of the human race. And so sometimes when you place your bets, you're going to be ridiculed. I forget what the odds were. They were like really skewed. If you were going to be a bookie for this boxing fight with the pro athlete and the social media guy, but it was skewed. And if you would have picked the underdog in that bet, you would have been mocked. And this is what the church has been for thousands of years. We place our bets on the underdog. And the world says, that's foolishness. That's offensive that you think the baby in the manger, that king on the cross, is where you're really worthy to put a bet on that. And as the church with resounding voices, we say yes. And we'll endure the scorn and the shame of placing our bets there. As the writer of Hebrews says in chapter 13 and verse 11, it says, speaking of the high priest and the sacrifice, it says, the high priest carries the blood of the animals into the most holy place as a sin offering, but the bodies are burned outside the camp. And so Jesus also suffered outside the city gate to make the people holy through his own blood. Let us then go to him outside the camp, bearing the disgrace he bore. For here we do not have an enduring city, but we are looking for the city that is to come. Through Jesus, therefore, let us continually offer up a sacrifice of praise, the fruit of our lips, to confess his name. And do not forget to do good and to share with others, for with such sacrifices, God is pleased. I'm glad you're in church this morning. You physically placed your body in a way where you're like, this is where I'm placing my bets. But the greatest gift to the world was given in the baby in the manger and in the king on the cross. And so as we close this morning, we could say with Paul, the world, you can be offended and you can think we're out of our minds, but this is where I'm betting on the baby in the manger. I'm betting on the king who was on the cross. This is where my life, my worth, my worship will go. Humility, faith, and worship